The Sharks continue their cuts as they get closer and closer to an opening night roster. Who's a lock and who still has work to do?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesdays on the Locked On NHL channel. Want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to get caught up on a bunch of the transactions from the Sharks as they sent two of their highly touted prospects back to juniors. Also going to look at who I think has who's a lock to make the opening night roster and who's still got a little bit of work to do. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right. Plenty of transactional news as the Sharks, starting on Friday afternoon and then on Monday as well, continue to kind of whittle down the roster as they get closer and closer to that magic number 23. Let's start with Friday's news, of course. Nobody here surprising. Mitchell Russell, Lucas Van Roboy, and Anthony Vincent, the forwards who were sent down. The defensemen, Artem Guryev, Braden Hashe, Joey Keane, and Valtteri Puli. All those guys expected to be on the Barracuda, maybe a couple ECHL guys. None of those guys were expected to kind of crack the Sharks roster this season. Monday, we got some more news. Sunday night, Monday, we got some more news of players who were sent down to the Barracuda. With the Barracuda starting training camp on Monday, with our first preseason game on Friday as well. You're starting to kind of splinter, focus in on those groups. That way, those groups can get the training and that they need to, and get those practice time, kind of more focused practice for these guys. So the forwards, Philip Easted, Brandon Coe, Kasper Halttunen. It's good to see there. Tristan Robbins, defenseman Ethan Frisch and Jake Furlong, goaltenders Gabriel Carrier and Georgi Romanov. Those guys were all sent to the Barracuda. You don't have to worry about waivers. Two players who were placed on waivers on Monday will have to clear waivers on Tuesday. The expectation is that they will clear waivers. Justin Bailey and Jimmy Schultz. So since those guys are veterans, they've played, they played a bunch of games. They do have to go through the waivers process. I don't expect those guys to have any issues with clearing. There's this time of year, a lot of teams are going through the waiver process to get some of these veteran guys down in the AHL, and it gives them some flexibility whenever having to move guys up or down. Right now, there's usually a little bit of a gentleman's agreement, especially with these guys who are projected to be AHL, kind of in the AHL for this season. Of course, the Sharks did claim Ty Emberson last year from the Rangers, but I would be surprised if either one of those guys gets claimed. The Sharks also sent back two of their prospects, two juniors, one being Quentin Musty and the other being Sam Dickinson. Let's start with Musty. So just as a reminder, I'm tapping the sign, tap, tap, tap. Quentin Musty not eligible to play with the Barracuda this year, because I know a lot of people were like, we'll just play him on the Barracuda. He can't because the NHL CHL agreement, basically where it starts with where you're drafted. Since Quentin Musty was in the OHL when he was drafted, he is subject to the NHL CHL agreement, which basically states until he's 20 years old, he either has to play in the NHL or in the CHL, which is the OHL, the Q, and the WHL. Musty doesn't turn 20 until next summer, so he has to be one or the other. And right now, he is just not NHL ready. Well, talk about that in a minute. But so kind of stinks with the CHL NHL agreement. I get why, because you want to protect your stars in the CHL, right? They're also a business. They want to promote their young players, et cetera, et cetera. But Musty, they're kind of stuck in a spot between having to play in the CHL or in the OHL or in the NHL. He's not NHL ready right now. Going back to Sudbury at the moment. I know people are already saying, well, what about Casper Holtenden? Casper Holtenden, remember, was in Liga when he was drafted in the Finnish league, and then made the decision to go to the OHL after he was drafted. Therefore, he is not subject to the CHL NHL agreement. That's why he can play on the Barracuda this year, despite not being 20 years old. Same thing with Igor Chernyshov, who the Sharks drafted in the second round this year. Played in Russia last year. Is expected to play in the OHL after his injury and could be on the Barracuda next year if he has a strong second half to his season. So just as a reminder, people forget. I get questions all the time. Well, why doesn't he just play on the Barracuda? I'll probably have to explain this 50 more times, but that's why he's not on the Barracuda. Musty's not on the Barracuda. As for Musty, I know it's a little disappointing because a lot of people, myself included, was hoping, kind of expected he would at least get his 9 games in the NHL. And you saw, right, against his peers, Musty is great. Playing against bigger, older players, he's just not there yet. And that's fine. Physically, he can hold up. Like, he is strong enough, I think, and he will continue to get stronger. But I think just it's the kind of the William Eklund thing, right? Why William Eklund spent an entire season in the AHL. If you're not scoring, what else can you do for me? And I don't think Quentin Musty has an answer to that right now. If you can't score, what else can you do for me? And I think that's going to be a big thing for him going back to Sudbury this season, is working on that part of his game. Like, we know he can score. We've seen him score. He put up over 100 points in like 52 games last year. It was almost a 2 points per player game in the OHL, and I expect him just to go back and have a monster season. But can you work on those other things? And can you play on the penalty kill? Can you play on the defensive side of the game? How does your game look when you don't have the puck? So that's what we're going to need to see from him, and kind of working on those areas. So disappointing, I know, but it's the best thing for him is to, instead of throwing him in the deep end in the NHL, I think for Musty is to utilize that year, another year in the OHL. And then if he needs to start next season in the AHL and then go from there, that's fine. That's just going to make him a better player down the road. So disappointing, I get it. But in the long run, it's the right move for Quentin Musty to spend more time developing his craft and working on his game. So as for Sam Dickinson, no surprise here. The same kind of thing where I've talked about is physically, I think he could make it in the NHL, but I think for him, it's spending another season, especially working on that processing when the game speeds up. What happens with you? And you saw some of that where it's just Dickinson's just like a split second too slow. And I don't think the Sharks want to do like a Korchinski situation where Korchinski spent the entire season with the Blackhawks last year and he got his teeth kicked in, right? And the hope is now he can kind of go through it and kind of try to build on that. But I think with the Sharks, they want to try to put Dickinson in the best position to succeed. London's going to be ridiculously good again this year. And Sam Dickinson is going to be a big part of that. So, London's probably going to go on another super deep playoff run, continue to get playoff experience, I think right move by both of them for Dickinson and for Quentin Musty to go back to juniors, and then you can kind of figure it out from there, right? Musty, if the Barracuda maybe go on a long run, if Quentin Musty gets knocked out of the playoffs early, Musty can play on the Barracuda when his OHL season's done, assuming the Barracuda are still playing. Same thing with Sam Dickinson. He can, I think the London season is going to last longer than the Barracuda season, but like these guys can at least get a taste of it in the spring, and then kind of see what happens next year for both these guys. So transactionally, I think we are caught up on everything that's happened Sharks with a lot of roster moves there. So we'll look at who is fighting for a job right now and who is a lock to make the opening night roster here in just 1 second. Hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. All right, guys, before we continue, we look at who's on the roster. I do want to let you guys know, of course, here at Locked On, we do have the Locked On NHL channel where we cover the NHL by large. You can check out every Tuesday. Seth and I, we do Western Conference. We'll continue our big questions about every Western Conference team. Or you also have Tuesday, if you want to dip into the Eastern Conference, Wednesdays, Eastern Conference, Thursday, power rankings, and then Monday and Friday are kind of the biggest stories happening in the NHL. So make sure you guys are following along there, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. Who's a lock? Who still has work to be done? Now that we are kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty of players left on the Sharks training camp roster. So let's look at the forward group here, who I think is a lock to make the team. So Macklin, Celebrini, I think is right. He's looked too good to not make the team. William Macklin, lock. Barclay Goodrow, lock, especially with his contract. Mikael Granlund, lock. Klim Kostin, I think has put himself into a lock as well. Again, with his style of play, what the Sharks are looking for, I think really adding some secondary scoring. Will Smith, I think, is a lock as well. I know his preseason game was a little up and down, but that's to be expected for any young player. I know it's pinning that. We'll get to that here in a second. Nico Sturm, Tyler Toffoli, Alex Wenberg, and Fabian Zetterlund. So I think all these guys are forwards, are locks to make the opening night roster. So I know Will Smith, there's some people saying he should go play in the AHL. I think the Sharks are going to give him every opportunity to kind of prove himself in the NHL, at least to start this season. And then if he struggles, you can send him down to the AHL. It's going to be, we too, as Sharks fans, need to kind of keep this in mind of like trying not to compare Celebrini and Smith too much. Like if you have kids, like I do, it's can be hard to not compare your children, especially as they're going through their developmental phases, right? Macklin Celebrini is a special player. Not to say Will Smith isn't a special player, but I think Macklin Celebrini's game, I think he's better equipped right now to make an more of a well-rounded impact in the NHL. That doesn't mean Will Smith isn't great at doing things and that he can't make an impact, but it's just something you have to keep in mind with both these players is don't compare your children or your child to other children, whether they're your own or other players' children's. You have to let them go on their own curve and their own development path. So if you're a parent, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, if you're not a parent, you'll get there. And you'll know, because it's very easy to do. I've done it myself. Why is my kid not doing this? So when they're doing it, like every kid has their own developmental path. And the same thing with Will Smith. I still think Will Smith is an NHL player right now. I think you're just going to see more ups and downs from him than you will Macklin Celebrini, and that is okay. But I don't think there's any surprises here on this forward lock group, right? Fabian Zetterlund, I think, is locked and loaded top 6. Wenberg, I think, is going to be that 3C, especially where it seems like the Sharks are going to give Will Smith an opportunity to be the second line center, or at least be the center with Mikael Granlund on his line. I did write about on the Reef if we should see Will Smith playing on the wing and then eventually slide to center once he gets comfortable. But it looks like they're going to kind of throw him in the deep end here a little bit with Smith. So, but I think, though, like you look at kind of that middle 6, bottom 6, like guys like Clean Costin, I think has done enough. Luke Cunnin, you're not going to see the production there, but what he is in, what he brings in the locker room, what he brings on the ice. I think Mike Greer really values that. I think Ryan Warsofsky values that. And I think he'll be slotted into his proper role and not elevated like we saw last year from him. So, I don't think there's any kind of big surprises there. So let's look at guys who I think are still fighting for their jobs right now. So Ethan Cardwell, Ty Dellinger, Colin Graff, Carl Grundstrom, Daniel Gushin, Andrew Podorowski, Giovanni Smith, and then Colin White. Just a reminder, Colin White is on an AHL only deal right now. If he were to make the Sharks, they would have to give him an NHL deal. We saw it from Justin Bailey last year, right? Bailey was signed PTO, AHL deal, NHL deal. So I still think Colin White's going to end up on the Barracuda, but having him hang around right now as you're still trying to kind of figure things out, that's fine. From these guys, I mentioned him earlier. Podorowski, I think, is destined for the AHL just because of we talked with Nick Nollenberger last week. He's probably going to be the Barracuda captain. He's going to have a huge role with the Barracuda. They're probably, again, trying to keep him around right now for some added depth. He knows exactly what his role is. He's going to score a bajillion points on the Barracuda. So Giovanni Smith, I think, is going to also end up on the Barracuda as well. I know he brings some grit and toughness, but I think you have other guys who can bring grit and toughness and also do other things as well. So I think Smith will probably be subject to waivers here at some point. And then I think you get guys like Ethan Cardwell. I think he's going to spend some time on the Barracuda. He's going to have to start the season on the Barracuda, but I think he's going to end up playing. He'll make his NHL debut at some point this season. I would be surprised if he doesn't. So that kind of leaves you with Dellandrea, Graff, Grundstrom, and Daniel Gushin kind of as the last guys here fighting for their roles. And I think they've all had their moments, and I think some guys have shown a little bit more than others. I think of those 4, I think Gushin's kind of shown the most with his ability to score. He's also improved defensively as well. Like, he's not as strong defensively as I think as the other guys are, but I think he can try hard, at least in the defensive zone. But you've seen every time he's on the ice, he produces. So I think it's going to be interesting how they kind of build that third line and what they want that third line to look like. So Grundstrom and Dellandrea, I think Dellandrea, if right now just a slight edge. I know he's played one more game than Grundstrom, but I think also his flexibility at center, which he played really well at center the other night. And then Colin Graff, who has shown so much, but him and Gushin are also waiver exempt. So Graff, I think, for a guy who's only played a handful of NHL games, I think for him, starting the season on the Barracuda isn't the worst thing in the world out there. So, and then Bordeleau, Chernyshov, and Couture are all injured. Chernyshov still on the Sharks roster right now, but he will be he'll be back. He'll be in the OHL playing with Saginaw, who's the defending Memorial Cup champions. And when he gets back to being healthy, he's gonna have he's going to be really good in the OHL. So I'm really high on Chernyshov and what I think the Sharks got to steal with him in the beginning of the second round. So, and Bordeleau, I think at this point, probably starts the season, especially since he hasn't really gotten back from his injury. I think he starts the season with the Barracuda and then is one of the first call-ups, especially if he has a hot start. And then Couture, of course, we know with him right now, it's just kind of the wait and see if he just ever can kind of get back. So yeah, those are the forwards. We'll talk about the defense, the goalies here, and then who do I have on my opening night roster? So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. If you want to catch an NFL game, NHL game, you got NBA coming up as well, baseball playoffs, or concert, whatever it is you need tickets for, you need to check out Game Time. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching for thousands of tickets. They have curated deals to make it easier to find the best prices on great seats. Super deals, anything with super is usually pretty good. Superman, Super Bowl, super deal, sign me up. You have seat views before you buy. Nothing worse than getting to an event and realizing you have bad seats. So you can actually see what your view looks like. The lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, so many awesome features. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Before we finish up here, again, thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second or third listen, go check out one of the great shows here in the Bay Area, right? You've got Locked On Niners, where there's always something going on with the 49ers, it feels like. You've got Locked On Warriors. You got Locked On Giants right now. You have Buster Posey just getting hired. Plenty of great stuff there. So, and then Locked On A's, RAP. Yes, it's still weird. It's gross. It's gross what they did with the A's. Anyway, that's for another podcast, like the Locked On A's podcast. So when you guys don't check out this one, go check out one of those great shows wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right, the defense. Pretty simple here. Here are your locks. So Matt Benning, Cody Ceci, Mario Ferraro, Jan Ruda, and Jake Wallman. All these guys are locks because of their roster, because of how old they are, who they are, and their cap hits. Like, no surprises for any of those. And we've talked about, I think, the impact Jake Wallman is going to have on this team. Cody Ceci, he's going to bring some. I know there's issues with Cody Ceci, right? Not everyone's favorite defenseman, but he's still going to elevate this defense compared to what we have seen from the last couple seasons. He is a reliable NHL defenseman. Matt Benning, who the Sharks desperately missed last season because of his hip injury. Benning was good 2 years ago. Like, he was very good 2 years ago. Again, like this, you're just trying to make it respectable, and I think that's what this defense is going to do. Jan Ruda, Mario Ferraro, like you know what you're getting with those guys. I'm curious to see Ferraro, like, now that there's more just people around who are like actual NHL defensemen, and Ferraro doesn't have to do everything. Maybe like not the Ferraro breakout, like, you know, all the points, et cetera, et cetera. But just like less wear and tear on Ferraro, less pressure on Ferraro, less Mario Ferraro has to do everything type of season. And then I think maybe a quality over quantity season for Mario Ferraro. Let's call it that. So those guys, we all know that's where they're at. Maybe not guys like, I think maybe like Jan Ruda might be in and out of the lineup a little bit more, especially with some of the younger guys kind of but you can call on these guys to come in. They'll play. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. So they're just professional NHL players. That's what we're looking for right now. The guys fighting for a job: Luca Cagnoni, Lucas Carlson, Jack Thompson, Henry Thrun. Of course, Muka Madulin and Vlasic are both injured. Both skated on Monday. Not practicing, but skating. It's kind of the first step. I still think it's probably iffy if they make it to the opening night. So I'm going to assume right now that they're both injured, too injured to make it to the opening night because we haven't seen them practice. So we'll put those guys to the side right now. Kenyoni, Carlson, Thompson, and Thrun. I still, as much as Kenyoni has been the story of a training camp when it comes to the blue line, I still think he spends the season with the Barracuda, at least starts the season with the Barracuda. I think it's the best place for him, right? Going from the WHL to the NHL, it's a big jump. A guy who's going to have to rely on his positioning, I think needs to spend some time playing against crafty veterans, learning that kind of the positioning stuff. You saw it in his preseason game. Did well, but he could kind of iron out some of those details. Lucas Carlson, I do believe, is going to be with the Barracuda. Maybe they're kind of, especially with the injuries right now to Muka Madonna Vlasic, trying to maybe keep him around for a little bit. Jack Thompson is an interesting one. Our good friend Shang wrote about how he could potentially make the team, especially with the injuries that the Sharks have. Go check out that. So, and then Henry Thrun, who I think's had a little bit of an up and down preseason, but I think it does make it, especially if Muka Madonna and Vlasic are injured, and it's kind of looking at least right now like I'm kind of assuming that those guys are not available for the Sharks. So yeah, that's at least who we have right now. And Thrun is still waivers exempt, so he can go down to the Barracuda without having to potentially be claimed. Finally, the goalies, Mackenzie Blackwood, Vitek Vanacek, and then Askarov, who is injured right now, but skating, we know. And Askarov's going to get his NHL time here and there, but it's going to be the Blackwood Vanacek show to start. So who makes it opening night? Here's my lines for the opening night. Macklin, Celebrini, Toffoli, Granlund, Will Smith, Fabian Zetterlund, Daniil Gushin, Alex Wenberg, Klim Kostin, Barclay Goodrow, Nico Sturm, Luke Cunnin. On the forward lines there, with Delandria and Grundstrom as my extras. And if you want, you can slide those guys in. I think that bottom six is going to be always kind of mixing and rotating, but I went the fun third line of Gushin, Wenberg, Kostin, because I think Gushin provides scoring, Kostin provides scoring, Wenberg can kind of be the setup guy. Kostin also provides a physicality. Sign me up for that. And then the blue collar lunch pail line of Goodrow, Sturm, Cunnin. You know exactly what those guys are out there to do. They're out there to play good defense, shut things down, and also those are three of your like four top penalty killers right there, between Goodrow, Cunnin, and Sturm. So on defense, Wallman, Ceci, Ferraro, Benning, Henry Thrun, Jan Ruda. Right now, I'm just going to assume Jack Thompson is kind of probably be the seventh because of Vlasic and Muka Madulin. If Muka Madulin's healthy, they'll probably at least give him a couple games in the Barracuda before bringing him up. And Vlasic, if you want to slide him in there, like I think they're probably going to bubble wrap with Vlasic with his age, make sure he's fully ready, with then Blackwood and Vanacek starting. So that's my roster. 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, and then 2 goalies right now. So that puts you at, quick math, 14 plus 7 is 21, 2 plus 2 is 23. So that's my roster, with Delandria, Grundstrom, and then Thompson as your extras right now. And then if you have some flexibility where you can send Thompson down when you want to bring up back Vlasic, or if you want to bring up Muka Madulin. And then, of course, Logan Couture is on IR to start the season. So that's going to be it for me today. When you're done, there's a Pacific preview episode that came out at 3 p.m. That was on YouTube. So it's me, Jason from the Ducks, Erica from the Kraken, and Jess from the Flames, kind of talking about the bottom of the Pacific. Really fun episode. Go check that out. Plenty of good stuff. We'll be back tomorrow to cover the Sharks, Utes, I don't know, Utes, whatever. Sharks versus the Utah Hockey Club preseason game. So make sure you guys are following for that wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at my fry hole. Keep an eye out. I have a Nate Miskey thing coming out here soon on the Reef. Until tomorrow. Bye, friends.